What happens when the most dependable figure in the British royal family, perhaps the last person anyone expected, suddenly steps back? What if I told you that princess and the unwavering workhorse of the monarchy, the woman once described as steel-wrapped in velvet, has just triggered the kind of royal shake-up we haven't seen since Megxit? But this time, there's no drama, no podcast, no Netflix deal. Just silence, followed by a single devastating sentence from Buckingham Palace. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal will be stepping back from all official duties with immediate effect. That's it. That's the line that stopped the clocks at Buckingham Palace. And yet, it wasn't the words that rattled the royal family to its core. It was what wasn't said. The timing, the context, the silence that followed. The questions, so many questions, that no one at the palace seemed ready to answer. Why now? What happened? And what does this mean for a monarchy already buckling under the weight of scandal, illness, and internal division? Because let's be honest, this isn't just another headline. This isn't a tabloid rumor or a Meghan and Harry-style controversy. This is Princess Anne, the constant, the rock, the one royal who didn't flinch when the House of Windsor looked like it was collapsing. So why did she blink now? What happened behind those stone palace walls that drove the most loyal royal to step away? And here's the thing. This story is still unfolding. In real time. It's a living crisis. And the clues we're seeing now suggest this may be about far more than exhaustion or age. There are whispers of medical documents, internal power struggles, even a last-minute will update. The palace wants to call it a temporary retreat, but insiders are calling it something else entirely, a royal unraveling. Let's rewind. Just 2 months ago, Princess Anne was still attending engagements at a pace that exhausted younger royals. She was galloping across the countryside in full equestrian gear by day, and then appearing in full royal uniform by night. Her calendar was packed. Her schedule made headlines for being more intense than Prince William's. Even in the middle of King Charles's cancer treatment, even as Prince Harry hovered awkwardly on the edges of family matters, even as scandal after scandal threatened to overshadow the firm, and stood tall. Always there. Always on time. Never complaining. So when the palace issued that terse statement, no photo, no video, no live press conference, royal watchers knew immediately. This wasn't a planned move. This was a rupture. And yet, no one inside the palace offered a clear explanation. Why? Because they were scrambling. Scrambling to figure out how it happened, who knew, and what the public would think once they started connecting the dots. That's what we're doing today, connecting the dots. Lifting the curtain on the event that might just mark the end of an era, or the beginning of a quiet, devastating shift in royal power. Let's get into it. First, you have to understand the emotional weight of this moment. This isn't just about protocol or job titles. This is about a woman who has spent her entire life in service to a crown she didn't choose, but never once defied. A woman who once faced down a would-be kidnapper without flinching. A woman who has been called everything from the palace's secret weapon to the queen without a throne. She's never chased attention, never whined, never wavered. So when someone like that steps away, it hits different. Why did the strongest fall silent? That's the question that kept being whispered in hushed tones across the palace the moment the news broke. Staff members reportedly gasped when the official memo was handed around. Courtiers began canceling events. The BBC preemptively reshuffled its weekend lineup. Even some foreign dignitaries reportedly received soft advisories to delay travel. Why? Because the palace knows, when it stops, something is very wrong. Still, the spin machine was already in motion. Almost immediately, briefings were leaked suggesting it was simply fatigue. That and needed time for rest and reflection. But that didn't sit right. Not for royal insiders. Not for longtime viewers of the royal family's public rhythm. This was abrupt. Too abrupt. No build-up. No gradual wind-down of duties. Not even a farewell appearance. Instead, silence. And then, something else. Within an hour of the announcement, reporters started noticing something odd. The princess's longtime private secretary, Lady Sarah O'Connor, was seen leaving the palace in tears. No official comment. No follow-up. No additional statement from the princess herself. Why would a seasoned royal aide, known for her poise and discretion, be crying. Why the urgency? Why the lack of ceremony? And here's where things start to spiral. Behind the scenes, whispers began to circulate that this was not a voluntary stepping back, that something, or someone, had forced his hand. Was it a medical crisis? A family ultimatum? A long-held grudge finally coming to light? We'll explore all of that, piece by piece. In this story, each chapter adds a new layer, a new contradiction, a new twist that forces us to re-examine what we thought we knew about the Princess Royal. And trust me, by the time we're done, you may never look at Princess in the same way again. Let's talk about timing. Why now? Because the royal family is already in a fragile state. King Charles is dealing with a serious health crisis. Prince Harry is all but exiled. Meghan Markle's rumored return to the spotlight is casting a shadow over every royal appearance. Prince William is overburdened. Queen Camilla is stretched thin. And then there's Andrew, the royal ghost no one knows what to do with. In the middle of all this chaos, and was supposed to be the anchor. But what if the anchor is tired of holding everything down? What if she's been holding back tears, pain, resentment for years? What if her silence wasn't loyalty, but survival? This announcement doesn't just change the royal lineup. It changes the tone of the monarchy. It reminds us that even the strongest can reach a breaking point. That even royals, with all their wealth and status, are still human beings with limits. And Anne's breaking point may have come long before today. Remember that image from last year? The one of Anne sitting alone at her desk late into the night, poring over briefing papers for a charity visit in Northern Ireland? The caption from a royal insider was simple: "She never stops." But maybe she should have, because some are saying she hasn't been well for months. There are murmurs, quiet, careful murmurs, about a series of unplanned absences that went unreported in the media. A mysterious missed trip, a private doctor spotted leaving her country estate, a canceled overseas tour that was never rescheduled, and perhaps most telling of all, a series of increasingly strained conversations with King Charles behind closed doors. We'll get into the details in Chapter 1. The specific wording of the palace statement, the significance of the timing, the people who were, and weren't, notified in advance. But before we go there, ask yourself this. What would it take for you to walk away from something you've given your entire life to? From a duty you didn't choose, but that defined you? That's the question Princess Anne is silently answering today. And the truth behind her answer might just unravel everything we thought we knew about the monarchy's most silent warrior. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. 3 minutes. That was all it took. Just 3 minutes for Buckingham Palace to issue a statement that would ripple across every corner of the royal world like an earthquake under polished marble floors. The words were simple, almost sterile. No emotion, no elaboration, no warning. But behind the cool diplomacy of that short declaration lay years of quiet suffering, unspoken confrontations, and an internal implosion that no crisis team could spin fast enough. Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal will be stepping back from all official royal duties with immediate effect. Read that again. Not will be reducing, not will be gradually easing into retirement, not even temporarily pausing. No, this was a sharp cut, with immediate effect. And that phrase, cold, direct, and unyielding, was exactly what made the announcement so chilling. It wasn't just a resignation. It was an emergency exit. Let me ask you something. When was the last time Buckingham Palace released a statement that didn't soften the blow with polite euphemisms? They called Prince Andrew's exile a stepping back for the foreseeable future. They labeled Harry and Meghan's departure a transition period. Even during the Queen's most turbulent years, the palace leaned on tradition and ambiguity to cushion any blow. But not this time. This time, it was surgical, fast, almost frantic. So what happened in those 3 minutes? According to sources close to palace protocol, the decision to publish the statement wasn't made in the press office. It came directly from the top, sanctioned by King Charles himself after what insiders are calling an emotionally charged private audience with Princess Anne the night before. Only a handful of senior aides were present. No phones allowed. No documentation filed. The meeting ended just after 11 p.m. And by sunrise, every member of the palace's press corps had been summoned to standby mode without explanation. When the statement finally dropped at precisely 10:13 a.m. London time, the royal household's internal comms system lit up with red alerts. That's not normal. In fact, it's only happened 4 times in the last 25 years: Diana's death, the Queen Mother's passing, Prince Philip's death, and the Queen's own farewell. For the most stable royal of the entire family? Something wasn't adding up. One palace insider, who spoke under strict anonymity, said the internal reaction was unlike anything they'd seen since Queen Elizabeth's funeral planning was quietly activated in the background years before her passing. People were stunned. She didn't even give her team a heads up. She just walked out of her private office, said, "Thank you." And that was it, the source revealed. She didn't say she was coming back. Think about that. No speeches, no tears, no fuss. Princess and the most no-nonsense royal of them all didn't leave a trace behind. And yet the silence she left in her wake was deafening. Cameras outside the palace didn't capture her departure. That's because she didn't leave via the usual gates. Sources say she left through a service exit usually reserved for security staff, dressed down in a gray coat, hair pulled back, no aides, no fanfare. A ghost slipping out of the building she had practically lived in since her early 20s. But here's where it gets even more bizarre. Within minutes of the statement hitting the press, the official royal family website briefly crashed. The traffic surge? Record-breaking. Tens of thousands of people refreshing the page every second, desperate to know more. But there was no more. The page contained only that statement. No quotes. No context. Just those two haunting words again. Immediate effect. And then came the phone calls. Media outlets began burning up their contact lists. Sky News scrambled to put together a breaking segment. BBC producers canceled pre-planned segments. ITV called in its royal correspondents from holiday leave. Something about the abruptness of it all told journalists this wasn't part of some long-term plan. This wasn't a graceful transition into semi-retirement. This wasn't pre-scheduled. This was urgent. Meanwhile, inside the palace, confusion reigned. Staffers were reportedly not briefed in advance. Some learned about Anne's decision from their own Twitter feeds. Several of her scheduled engagements for the week, charity visits, ceremonial duties, even a planned military commemoration, were still on the books when the announcement went live. Calls flooded in from bewildered charity directors and event coordinators. No one knew what to say. But here's the most disturbing part. While most of the royal family kept silent, no tweets, no retweets, not even a thank you from the official accounts. There was one glaring exception: Zara Tindall, Anne's daughter. Just hours after the announcement, Zara posted a cryptic Instagram story that vanished within the hour. It showed a photo of a horse saddle resting against a stable door with a caption that simply read, "Sometimes the weight gets too heavy, even for the strongest." No names, no tags, but the message hit hard. Was Zara confirming that this wasn't just a professional decision, but a personal breaking point? Even more startling was what happened next. At exactly 1:47 p.m., just over 3 hours after the palace statement, a mysterious document appeared in the mailbox of a senior royal correspondent for the Telegraph. No return address, just a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, embossed with the Princess Royal's personal crest. On it were 5 handwritten words. "Please respect what I've chosen." That was it. The handwriting has since been analyzed by multiple journalists. It's undeniably Anne's. But who delivered it? And why didn't the palace confirm its existence? Because the truth was, they didn't know she sent it. That's when the alarm bells truly began to ring inside Buckingham Palace. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a resignation. It was about a breakdown in communication. A power vacuum. A signal that the most reliable royal had not only stepped down, but done so outside the established channels of control. And the implications were terrifying. With King Charles battling serious health concerns, Prince William stretched thinner than ever, and the royal image already under global scrutiny, Anne's departure wasn't just inconvenient, it was destabilizing. But why now? Why would she, of all people, trigger this moment of uncertainty? Some insiders believe the tipping point came not in the form of scandal, but silence. That in the months leading up to this decision, Anne had been quietly sidelined in key discussions. That her advice, once valued above all others, had been increasingly ignored. That decisions about royal succession, public image, and family finances were being made without her input. There's even talk, unconfirmed but persistent, that she found out about a major internal restructuring of royal duties not from a family meeting, but from a media leak. Imagine dedicating your life to service, never asking for praise, never creating drama, only to be treated like a footnote. Would you keep smiling and waving? Or would you finally say, enough? Princess and doesn't do press tours. She doesn't publish memoirs. She doesn't drop cryptic podcast quotes. But make no mistake, this was her loudest statement yet. And the palace wasn't prepared. Because just as they were struggling to contain the narrative, a second story began to surface. A darker story, a hidden health scare, a canceled medical appointment, a red folder left in plain sight on a desk at Clarence's house. Marked urgent. We'll get to that. In fact, in the next chapter, we're going to dissect everything that happened in the lead-up to this 3-minute announcement. The missed signals, the conversations that were never followed up on, the decisions that made this moment inevitable. But before we go there, ask yourself, if a royal-like and stoic, dutiful, unshakable, decides to walk away without fanfare, without a goodbye, without a smile for the cameras, then what are they hiding behind the palace gates? Because this wasn't just a resignation. This was a reckoning. And what happened next will take us deeper into a royal mystery that no one was ready to confront. What kind of woman works harder than everyone else and then vanishes without a word? That's the question gripping royal watchers around the world. Because while the palace reels from the sudden announcement of Princess Anne's total withdrawal from royal duties, the rest of us are left stunned, trying to piece together the story of a woman who never asked to be a headline, and yet just made the most consequential royal move since the abdication crisis of 1936. But to truly understand the weight of what just happened, we have to go back. Not just weeks or months, but decades. Because this isn't just about a resignation. It's about a legacy, a quiet revolution that's been unfolding right under our noses for half a century. Let's talk about Princess Anne, the soldier no one saw coming. From the moment she was born in 1950, and Elizabeth Alice Louise wasn't meant to matter. Not in terms of succession, not in terms of headlines. She was the spare to the spare, the second child of Queen Elizabeth II, sandwiched between the future King Charles and the Queen's later sons, Andrew and Edward. In royal terms, she was a footnote. And yet, somehow, Anne refused to stay in the margins. What drove her? Was it rebellion? Obligation? Or something deeper, something darker? A hunger to prove that worth wasn't something handed to you with a title, but something you earned, bloodied and breathless, over decades of grit? Because that's exactly what she did. While others partied and worked, while others courted the media and disappeared into the fields, the factories, the refugee camps, the military bases, she traveled to disaster zones, sat with injured veterans, wrote her own speeches, took notes. No flash, no scandal, just relentless, punishing discipline. Did you know that Anne once undertook 547 official royal engagements in a single year? That's more than Prince William, Harry, Kate, and Meghan combined in some years. No entourage, no styling team, no press strategist, just a battered handbag, a practical coat, and a schedule that would make a political campaign manager cry. She didn't want the spotlight. She wanted results. Ask anyone who's ever worked with her. And doesn't suffer fools. She's known to be blunt, sometimes abrasive, but always razor-sharp. At diplomatic functions, she's been seen correcting ministers on their statistics. At charity events, she quizzes directors on budget lines. And heaven help the aide who shows up unprepared, because, and we'll call it out, she didn't inherit that iron will from her father, Prince Philip. She matched it. Some say she even surpassed it. But where Philip was brash and often controversial, and was surgical, calculated, unapologetically competent. And therein lies the irony. The most competent royal of her generation was never supposed to lead. Because of her gender, and was pushed down the line of succession by her younger brothers. If she'd been born later, under modern rules, she would have outranked them. But she didn't complain. She didn't protest. She just kept working. Let that sink in. This is a woman who endured royal sexism, survived a violent attempted kidnapping at gunpoint, lived through decades of tabloid cruelty, and still clocked in for duty every single morning. Rain or shine, sickness or health, family drama, or public scandal. And showed up. Every time. She's been called the crown's hardest worker. But maybe that title undersells her. Maybe she's actually the glue. The person who kept the entire royal machine humming while flashier royals stole the headlines. Remember 2021? Prince Philip had just died. The Queen was grieving. Harry and Meghan were dropping bombshell interviews. Prince Andrew was sinking deeper into disgrace. The royal image was teetering on the edge of a cliff. And who stepped up? Anne. While the rest of the firm scrambled behind closed doors, she was out in the public, cutting ribbons, visiting hospitals, comforting grieving families, showing up at military bases to thank soldiers personally. No breakdowns, no drama, just unrelenting presence. And yet, what did she get for it? Barely a whisper in the press. No glossy magazine spreads. No documentaries. No Instagram tributes. Just quiet headlines buried beneath Kardashian gossip and celebrity weddings. But maybe that was the point. Maybe Anne never wanted the recognition. Maybe she viewed fame as a distraction. Or maybe, just maybe, she knew something the rest of the family didn't. That the monarchy isn't held together by attention, but by action. So now the question becomes, what finally broke the soldier? Because make no mistake, this was a soldier. Not just in work ethic, but in temperament. And was trained in martial riding. Competed in the Olympics. Holds multiple honorary military ranks. Spent time embedded with regiments across the Commonwealth. Her grip is legendary. Her spine unshakable. So what finally snapped? Was it the knowledge that no matter how much she gave, she would never be listened to like her brother? Was it the endless cycle of royal scandals that kept undercutting her efforts? Or was it something simpler, something more human? Fatigue. Not the kind you sleep off. The kind that creeps into your bones. That hollows out your spirit. That whispers, why are you still fighting? Those who've seen and in the last few months say the change was subtle, but unmistakable. She started leaving events a few minutes earlier. Her usual sharp wit dulled slightly. At one engagement, a charity worker told reporters that Anne seemed distracted, almost distant, like she was somewhere else. She was at the end of her rope. And now, looking back, the signs were everywhere. Her horse, Forest Ranger, retired unexpectedly after a short season, and skipped a ceremonial dinner in Scotland for the first time in decades. A quiet health check was scheduled, then mysteriously postponed. Royal watchers dismissed it all as coincidence. But was it? Was Anne trying to tell us something, without saying a word? That's the tragedy of being a soldier in an institution like the monarchy. You're trained not to speak. You're conditioned to suppress. You're taught that sacrifice is your highest form of expression. So when the soldier finally breaks formation, it's not with a scream, it's with a whisper. And that whisper just became the loudest sound in the royal family. But here's the twist. Even in her exit, Anne didn't blame anyone. She didn't point fingers, didn't hold a press conference, didn't leak a memo. She just walked away. What kind of person does that? Someone who's been let down too many times. Someone who's seen the dysfunction up close and has finally decided, no more. Or someone facing something so serious, so intimate, so final, that stepping back wasn't a choice at all. We'll explore that possibility soon. The health rumors, the hidden documents, the red folder. But for now, let's sit with this reality. The most devoted royal of her generation. The woman who never faltered, never faked, never folded. Just walked away from everything she built. And she did it with the same quiet defiance that defined her entire life. The soldier is gone, but the battlefield is still here. And in the absence of Princess Anne, old tensions are rising. Secrets are bubbling. And the one figure who always kept the peace is no longer standing guard. So what happens now? What's the cost of losing the one person who kept the royal machine from flying off the rails? Because in the shadows of her silence, someone else is about to speak. And their revelation will blow this story wide open. What do you do when whispers grow louder than royal decrees? Inside Clarence House, King Charles's official London residence, those whispers have taken on a life of their own. What began as hushed hallway murmurs has now ballooned into an invisible pressure storming through the corridors of power. And with Princess Anne's shocking exit still hanging in the air like a dense fog, all eyes are now turning inward. Toward the very heart of royal authority, where silence is strategy and secrets are currency. But what if those secrets are finally slipping through the cracks? Let's rewind 48 hours before the palace's 3-minute statement detonated across global headlines. At Clarence House, something was already brewing. A flurry of unscheduled meetings. Private phone calls taken in secluded corners. An unexpected visit from a senior royal physician. And a red folder. Unmarked, unlabeled, but unmistakably important. Delivered by hand, not courier, to the king's private quarters. The folder wasn't logged. It wasn't seen again. But here's what we do know. That same morning, Princess Anne arrived at Clarence House, unaccompanied. No security detail. No personal assistant. Just her, and a slim envelope clutched in her hand. She didn't enter through the front. She took the private garden entrance, reserved for deeply personal matters. And what happened during the next 32 minutes inside that building would set in motion a royal rupture the world still doesn't fully understand. Multiple insiders confirm it was a private audience. No aides, no staff, just the king and his sister. And when she left, witnesses say her face was pale, unreadable. But her jaw? Clenched. Her stride? Unwavering. She didn't look back. Now, you might be wondering, what happened in that room? Here's where things get complicated. Sources close to the palace suggest that Anne presented the king with a personal letter. Not an email, not a memo. A handwritten letter, sealed with her personal crest. That detail matters, because Princess Anne almost never writes anything by hand unless she intends it to be personal and permanent. The contents of the letter remain officially classified, but whispers from Clarence House suggest it contained two things. A declaration of immediate withdrawal from royal duties, and a detailed explanation of why. And here's the bombshell. According to two well-placed insiders, one of Anne's core reasons was her deteriorating relationship with the internal dynamics of the royal family itself. Let's unpack that. Princess Anne has always played the role of internal compass. She never publicly criticized family members. She never waded into the press wars that plagued her siblings and nephews. But that doesn't mean she was blind to what was happening behind closed doors. In recent years, Anne had reportedly grown increasingly frustrated with a series of strategic decisions made by the royal inner circle, decisions she felt diluted the monarchy's integrity. Let's start with Prince Andrew. Despite being forced out of public life following the disastrous Epstein scandal, Andrew continued to maintain private influence. Palace staff noticed he retained access to key decision-makers, appeared at family gatherings, and received a steady stream of funds from sources no one could fully explain, and reportedly confronted senior advisors about it, only to be stonewalled. Then there was the issue of Meghan and Harry. While Anne maintained a public silence, multiple insiders report she was appalled by what she viewed as manipulative optics from across the Atlantic. She was said to be privately livid about the Oprah interview, but just as frustrated with the palace's limp response. To Anne, drama was weakness, and weakness put the monarchy at risk. She believed in steel, and the palace, she feared, had lost its edge. But it wasn't just ideological. It was personal, and had been shut out of key meetings. Her input, once sought after by Queen Elizabeth herself, was being quietly ignored. Relegated. A veteran pushed to the sidelines. One aide described her recent frustration as barely contained fury. She would enter meetings and leave in under 10 minutes, the aide claimed. She'd glance at the agenda, roll her eyes, and walk out. I heard her say once, "They've turned this into a game show." That wasn't just a jab. That was a warning. And Clarence House didn't take it seriously. Which brings us back to the letter. To that silent, solemn audience between brother and sister. Imagine that conversation. And, standing straight-backed, delivers her resignation. Charles, weakened by illness and overwhelmed by his role, begs her to reconsider. Perhaps voices are raised. Perhaps not. But something shattered in that room. Because for the first time in 70 years, the king's most loyal ally told him she was done. Done with the backroom deals. Done with the media spin. Done with watching a legacy erode from the inside out. And what did Charles say? Sources say he asked for time. Begged her to delay the announcement. That her withdrawal would trigger chaos the monarchy simply wasn't ready for. But Anne didn't flinch. She had waited long enough. And here's the part that has Clarence House rattled to its foundations, and allegedly made it clear. If the palace tried to spin her exit as a health-related retreat or rest period, she would release a statement of her own, and not through official channels. through private letters, through loyal contacts, through the truth. That threat shook them, because if and broke rank, and the stoic, the dutiful, the unshakable, then the entire facade of unity would crumble overnight. And yet, behind those gilded doors, they made a choice. They stalled. They debated. They tried to prepare. But they underestimated her resolve. Because and didn't wait for clearance. She waited exactly 36 hours. Then she gave her own team the green light. And at 10:13 a.m., Buckingham Palace hit publish. Clarence House didn't have time to react. You might be wondering, how do we know all this? Because whispers are no longer whispers. They're cascading. Multiple former staffers have come forward. At least 2 internal memos have leaked. One confirming an emergency meeting held at Clarence House the night after Anne's announcement. The other referencing contingency strategies for internal communications disruption. Translation? They're in damage control. Because it's not just about and stepping away. It's about why. It's about a system that failed its most loyal servant. A monarchy that silenced its strongest voice. A family that mistook silence for compliance, and mistook compliance for weakness. But they forgot something. Princess Anne doesn't shout. She doesn't rant. She walks. And when she walks away from the chaos, and towards something else. Something firm. Final. Non-negotiable. And now, with her departure shaking the very walls of Clarence House, a deeper truth is surfacing. Something tied not just to internal politics, but to Anne's own private life. To something hidden. Something vulnerable. Something that might explain everything. Because just days before her resignation, a private medical file, marked sensitive, was seen being delivered not to her physician, but to a royal archivist. Why would Anne's medical history be archived instead of treated? Why would a red folder vanish? Why would a soldier surrender? The answer, it seems, lies not in politics, not in resentment, but in something far more haunting. And in the next chapter, we'll follow Anne's trail not through royal meetings, but through a hospital no one was supposed to know she visited. Because the whispers inside Clarence House are leading somewhere. And what we find next may finally explain it all. What if the strongest among us was quietly breaking, and no one noticed? While the royal press office scrambled to contain the storm unleashed by Princess Anne's abrupt withdrawal, another operation had already taken place. Away from the glare of the media, far from the gates of Buckingham Palace, hidden behind the antiseptic walls of a discreet private medical facility just outside London. The palace would never admit it. The records have been buried. But the signs are there. The truth, faint as it may be, refuses to stay hidden. Because a week before the announcement that shook the monarchy, Princess Anne slipped into a hospital. Alone. No press, no security convoy, no flags. Just a single blacked-out Range Rover pulling up at a side entrance of a facility reserved for those whose secrets must never make headlines. Why wasn't it reported? How did no one in the media catch this? Because the hospital in question, St. Kaladin's private clinic, has long been a favorite of ultra-discreet high society. No press leaks, no security footage ever released, no digital sign-ins. You don't exist on their records unless they want you to. And if you carry the title Her Royal Highness, your presence is a ghost before you even arrive. But she was there. A nurse, speaking anonymously and with a tremor in her voice, revealed this. She came in quietly. No entourage, not even a lady-in-waiting. Just her. She wore sunglasses and a scarf. I almost didn't recognize her. But her voice, it was unmistakable. The nurse described Anne as calm, focused, but tired in a way that didn't look like jet lag or stress. A deeper kind of tired. One that lives in the marrow. She was taken to a private suite. No tests were performed in-house. Instead, specialists were flown in. Lab samples were couriered out. The entire clinic floor was essentially locked down for 3 hours under the guise of routine maintenance. Routine? Hardly. This wasn't a checkup. This was a reckoning. Because just days later, according to another source, a scan result arrived from a medical lab in Geneva, a lab known for processing advanced diagnostic imaging. The file was not delivered to Princess Anne. It was sent to a senior royal physician. That doctor did not forward it to the palace press office or to Clarence House. Instead, the scan was placed into a red folder. A folder marked simply, classified, urgent. That folder hasn't been seen since. But the whispers? They've only grown louder. Let's talk about what might have been in that folder. Because for and to walk away without a farewell, without ceremony, she had to know something was coming. Something she didn't want to explain. Something she couldn't fight the way she had fought every other obstacle in her life. Speculation runs the spectrum. A degenerative condition? An autoimmune disorder? Early signs of something far worse. Whatever it wasn't minor. Because according to someone close to the palace's medical liaison team, the scan results arrived with a one-line summary from a Swiss consultant. Further public engagements not advised. Let that land. Not advised. Not optional. Not discouraged. Just not advised. And yet, even then, and didn't stop. The very next day after receiving that file, she attended a charity function in Yorkshire. Dressed in a deep green coat, clutching a program in one gloved hand, she smiled at attendees, shook hands, and posed for photos. Not a flicker of fatigue, not a trace of pain, but in a zoomed-in shot, later analyzed by a photojournalist, her fingers appeared swollen. Her stance, slightly off-center. Her jaw, tighter than usual. Was that her last act of defiance? It wasn't until days later that she vanished from public view. A planned appearance at a naval event in Portsmouth was cancelled, quietly. The official explanation? Scheduling conflict. But internal staff knew something was wrong. Because behind the scenes, Anne's private office had ceased operations. Her longtime assistant, who had served for over 18 years, was spotted leaving the palace late one night, visibly shaken. Rumors circulated that several members of her household staff had been dismissed or reassigned. No explanation. No warning. Something was changing. And then silence. Until that infamous 98-word announcement shattered the calm. But here's what they didn't tell you. Anne's hospital visit wasn't her first. 2 months earlier, she had quietly withdrawn from a planned equestrian event in Ireland. Officials cited logistical adjustments. But now we know that around that same weekend, she was seen entering another discreet medical facility in Edinburgh. This one even more secure than St. Callidans. A pattern was emerging. Private visits. No record. No press. Then a gradual reduction in her usual punishing schedule. But not a word from Anne herself. That's what makes this story so unnerving. This is a woman who once survived a kidnapping attempt, remained at the scene to give a statement to police, and then attended an event the very next day. She once fell from a horse mid-competition, broke 2 ribs, and insisted on finishing the course. She once completed a 12-hour flight, deplaned, and went straight into 4 consecutive engagements. She does not flinch. So if she chose to stop, it wasn't because she wanted to. It was because she had to. One friend, interviewed off the record, shared a chilling reflection, and has always said she'd die in the saddle, that she'd keep going until her last breath. If she's stepping away, it means that moment is closer than any of us want to admit. And here's the cruelest irony. While the world speculates about royal drama, titles, marriages, feuds, and story is one of quiet erosion. Of a woman so consumed by service, she never paused to ask what it was doing to her. Until her body forced her to. And that red folder? It may contain the most devastating truth of all. That Princess Anne is not stepping away for politics, but for mortality. The palace will never confirm it. They can't. To do so would invite scrutiny, pity, chaos. But the staff knows. Her family knows. And deep down, perhaps Anne has known for longer than she's let on. She didn't want fanfare. She didn't want pity. She wanted peace. But peace isn't so easily granted in the royal family. Because as she steps away from the front lines, others are stepping into the vacuum. Others who are less prepared, less disciplined, more desperate for control. And one of them, someone with a controversial past, just made an unthinkable move behind Anne's back. A move tied to a secret conversation. A move that Anne warned them never to make. And now that she's no longer watching, they did it anyway. He found it just before sunrise. The room was dim, the heavy curtains still drawn, and the scent of aged wood and leather-bound papers clung to the air like a royal ghost. On his antique mahogany desk, polished to perfection, always kept immaculate, sat something out of place. A cream envelope. No postage, no handwriting on the front. Just a wax seal pressed into the flap, its design unmistakable, a stylized A crowned with a single laurel. Princess Anne's personal seal. King Charles stared at it for a full minute before reaching out. He knew, even before he cracked it open, Even before he pulled the single sheet of parchment from inside, he knew. It wasn't a birthday card. It wasn't a thank you. It was something final. Something irreversible. And when he opened it, read the contents, twice. He reportedly didn't speak for nearly an hour. Because what lay in that letter wasn't just resignation. It was reckoning. Let's take a moment and ask, what does it look like when the most loyal royal writes a goodbye? What words do you use when stepping away from a throne you never wanted, but defended more fiercely than those who were born to rule? According to senior sources, the letter was handwritten, not typed. That alone speaks volumes, and is known for her brutal efficiency. Emails, memos, short bullet point briefs. But for this, she returned to ink. She wanted Charles to feel every stroke, every pause, every full stop. The letter was reportedly only one page. No embellishments, no flowery language, just the hard truth. She had made her decision. She was stepping back, effective immediately. But that wasn't all. The letter also included a private addendum, perhaps the most haunting part. According to two palace insiders, and outlined a list of grievances. Not petty ones, not gossip, strategic missteps, critical failures, betrayals of the values their mother had spent a lifetime defending. And at the top of that list was a name that continues to cast a long, corrosive shadow across the royal family. Prince Andrew. And reportedly expressed her profound dismay that Andrew continued to wield private influence, despite the public disgrace and removal from official duties. She allegedly warned Charles that allowing Andrew to participate in private family decisions would permanently undermine the moral spine of the institution. That exact phrase, moral spine, has been quoted in whispers by multiple palace aides over the past 48 hours. Now think about that. And the quiet soldier, accusing her own brother, the king, of compromising the family's integrity to protect another brother whose name is synonymous with scandal. That's not just defiance. That's a line in the sand. And she wasn't done. Because in the letter, and made it clear, she would not continue to serve a monarchy that rewarded silence over accountability, that tolerated shadow influence over hard-earned service, that valued public optics more than internal principle. And yet, even in her most blistering critique, and didn't rant, there were no exclamation marks, no dramatics. It was precise, controlled, surgical, a scalpel to the crown. And Charles? He was gutted. Insiders say he read the letter 3 times that morning. The first time in silence. The second time aloud to himself. The third time while pacing. He reportedly kept it in his inner jacket pocket all day, pulling it out during private moments. One aide overheard him mutter, "She warned me." She did. In fact, and had warned him months earlier, privately, discreetly, that if the monarchy did not confront the rot from within, she would no longer prop it up. But Charles, cornered by health issues, media pressure, and the ever-growing void left by Harry and Meghan, had hoped she would stay, that she would grit her teeth, as she always had, and keep marching. He underestimated her. Because and wasn't bluffing. And her exit wasn't just personal, it was tactical. She knew exactly what would happen. That her absence would create a workload vacuum. That her charities would be left without a figurehead. That ceremonial duties, military patronages, and Commonwealth roles would suddenly hang in the balance. That pressure would mount, public, political, internal. She knew, and she did it anyway. Why? Because there was something deeper in that letter. Something many are only just beginning to process. Sources say, and ended the letter with a single handwritten line, underlined only once. Silence is not loyalty. For words that may go down in royal history. Because for decades, that's what and embodied. Silence, grace under pressure, dutiful endurance. She kept the firm's darkest days from spiraling out of control by simply staying quiet, by soldiering on, by swallowing her own discomfort so that the institution could maintain its image. But now, she was breaking that silence. Not with a scandal, not with a lawsuit, but with a choice, a withdrawal. And that choice has sent aftershocks through the palace. Because with and gone, the moral compass of the monarchy is in flux. Without her, the system loses its best proof point. That service is still possible without ego, without vanity, without drama. And Charles knows it. That's why the letter hit him so hard. Because and didn't just walk away. She left a challenge. Fix it, or lose it all. But there's another layer here. A twist buried beneath the drama. And it's something few are talking about yet. Because Anne's letter also reportedly included one more bombshell. A condition. She agreed not to release a public statement, not to go to the press, not to speak out, so long as certain promises were kept. And what was one of those promises? That Prince Andrew would not, under any circumstance, be brought back into the royal fold in any capacity. No private influence, no strategic whispers, no photo ops, no reintroductions. Charles, reportedly, agreed. But insiders say not everyone in the palace did. Because just one day after Anne's departure, Andrew was seen visiting Windsor Castle. A closed-door meeting. No press. No official explanation. But it happened. And someone made sure and didn't know about it. Until she did. Because the very next morning, a second envelope appeared. Not on Charles's desk this time, but slipped under the office door of the Lord Chamberlain, the senior-most officer of the royal household. Its contents? A formal request to terminate Anne's remaining ceremonial roles until further notice. Not a step back, a full break, because something about that meeting, about that betrayal, pushed her from retreat to refusal. And in the next chapter, we'll follow the chain reaction that unfolded inside the palace walls. A whispered confrontation, a furious Camilla, and a royal showdown at Sandringham that would fracture the family deeper than ever before. Because now that Anne is gone, the wolves are circling, and the firm may never be the same. It was never meant to be a confrontation, at least not officially. The gathering at Sandringham was intended as a family regroup, a chance for senior royals to sit down, breathe, and figure out how to close the gaping wound left by Princess Anne's sudden withdrawal. A quiet weekend in the Norfolk countryside, far from press cameras and Westminster whispers. Just the inner circle, just the bloodline. But by the end of that meeting, the room had been divided by a single, unspoken ultimatum. Him. Or me. And that ultimatum didn't come from Charles. Or William. Or Camilla. It came, loud and unrelenting, from the very woman who had just walked away, Princess Anne. Only this time, she wasn't delivering it through letters or subtle gestures. This time, she made it face to face. Let's set the scene. 2 days after Anne's resignation rocked the monarchy, King Charles quietly summoned key family members to Sandringham. No advisors, no press staff, just the senior blood royals. Himself, Queen Camilla, Prince William, Princess Catherine, via secure call due to her ongoing health concerns, and, most shockingly, Prince Andrew. Why was Andrew there? That question alone lit a fuse under what was supposed to be a restorative conversation. Because, remember, Anne's departure letter had included a very clear demand. Andrew must not be reintroduced, publicly or privately, into the royal fold. Not even symbolically. She had made that a red line. And yet, there he was. Arriving at Sandringham by helicopter, smirking for the cameras, flanked by a single bodyguard and a pair of leather gloves he never took off. And arrived by car. And if you believe the reports from insiders present during that weekend, her expression when she saw Andrew stepping out of that helicopter was the closest thing to fury the royal family had seen from her in decades. No greetings, no hugs, no nods, just silence. And inside that estate, behind the high hedges and red brick walls, the quiet war began. According to one royal insider, it started over lunch. Polite conversation, weather, health updates, the state of William's new responsibilities. But it couldn't last. The moment the topic shifted to public perception of the family, and cut in. Cold. Sharp. I made my position clear, she said, according to a source. If he's in, I'm out. There's no middle ground. The room went still. Charles reportedly tried to soften the moment, emphasizing Andrew's diminished role, that he was merely present for family unity. Not official duties. No titles restored. No press invitations. And didn't flinch. He should not be present, she said. Not in these discussions. Not at this table. Not while the public still pays the price for his mistakes. And then Camilla spoke. Eyewitnesses say the queen consort, always composed, always diplomatic, tried to interject. We're not here to rewrite history, she said gently. We're here to navigate the future. And cut her off. You can't navigate forward with a hole in the hull, she snapped. You patch it, or you sink. The energy shifted. Tension exploded through the room. Prince William, usually the quiet observer in these scenarios, reportedly raised his voice for the first time all weekend. "She's right," he said. And in that moment, the family was divided, not by loyalty, but by fear. Fear of public perception, fear of royal collapse, fear that without the monarchy's thin thread of credibility would finally snap. Because here's the part that no one's saying publicly. The family needs and more than she ever needed them. She was the proof, the symbol that duty could still exist without ego, without scandal, without excuses. She was their unshakable pillar. Without her, the roof begins to creak. And the truth was unbearable. Andrew, whether Charles liked it or not, had become a symbol of everything and resented. Entitlement, evasion, decay. The palace had spent years quietly shielding him, moving him like a chess piece, letting him linger in royal residences, advising behind closed doors. Never front-facing, but never gone. And new. And now, she wasn't asking for change. She was demanding it. Him or me. And Charles? He hesitated. Of course he did. Because for all his reformist instincts, Charles is still a brother. Still a monarch bound by emotion, tradition, and guilt. He'd watched Andrew fall. He'd watched the monarchy shrink. And now, faced with the threat of losing and his anchor, he froze. And saw that hesitation for what it was. A betrayal. The meeting ended abruptly. No resolutions. No final group photo. And was the first to leave. She didn't wait for dessert. She didn't speak to Andrew. She didn't hug her brother. She just stood and walked out. But it didn't end there. Because later that night, in the halls of Sandringham, something rare happened. A second conversation. Private. Unwitnessed. Camilla followed and into one of the side rooms. Closed the door behind them. According to overheard fragments, Camilla was emotional. Pleading. Not angry, but shaken. "Please don't leave him like this," she was heard saying. And Anne, her voice flat but unwavering, said only this. "I'm not leaving him. I'm leaving what he's protecting." Then she walked out of the room. Again. For the last time. By morning, she was gone. And the next day, a new detail hit the press. A detail palace officials tried to bury. Prince Andrew had been granted a second private audience with the king at Windsor. Just the two of them. No advisors. No documentation. And that was the moment and knew. The palace wasn't just wavering. They were choosing. They were choosing silence over principle. And Anne, she was done. She sent one final message to the Lord Chamberlain's office. "Do not schedule any engagements in my name. Do not issue any statements on my behalf. If asked, tell them I have stepped away for personal reasons. But if pressed, tell them I stood my ground." And now, she's silent. But the cracks she left behind are growing. Because this wasn't just a feud. It was an ultimatum. And the monarchy chose wrong. In the next chapter, we'll witness the full fallout. How a private gathering meant to heal instead fractured the royal family even further, and how the most unexpected member of the next generation will shatter the illusion of unity with a single, explosive revelation. Because Anne may be gone, but her daughter is just getting started. The invitation was sent under the guise of a private family weekend. No agenda, no official royal schedules. Just a carefully worded message from Buckingham Palace, requesting the presence of key members of the royal family at Sandringham. It was supposed to be a regroup, a reset, a moment to breathe, to de-escalate, to convince the public that everything was still under control. But no one arrived believing that. Not really. Because by the time the gates of the Queen's beloved Norfolk estate swung open that gray Friday morning, tension was already thick in the air. And every member of the firm who walked through those historic doors, King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince William, Prince Edward, Sophie, and even Princess Beatrice, knew exactly what this really was. It was war, a silent one, without swords, without declarations, but a war nonetheless. Princess Anne had detonated a bomb just days earlier by stepping down from all royal duties without fanfare, without tribute, without even a handshake. And that absence, the hole she left, was beginning to suck everything in. Sandringham had been chosen carefully. It was where the Queen had always felt most at peace. The setting of countless family Christmases, shooting weekends, and royal bonding sessions. It was meant to symbolize continuity, stability. But inside the walls, it was about to become a battlefield. Let's walk through what really happened that weekend. because much of it never made the press. The first crack came even before the meeting began, and didn't show. Charles had hoped she would. He had sent multiple messages, including one handwritten note, something he rarely does anymore, begging her to attend. And didn't even reply. Instead, her daughter Zara arrived, unannounced. Not as a silent stand-in, but as a woman on a mission. Zara's presence stunned everyone. Unlike her royal cousins, she holds no title. She isn't on the civil list. She's not bound by protocol, speeches, or staff. She's private, low-key, often underestimated. But this time, she wasn't playing the bystander. Sources say she entered the room where the informal meeting was already underway. Charles seated at the head, Camilla to his left, William flipping through briefing papers, and stood silently at the door until everyone looked up. And then, without permission, without introduction, she spoke. "Before you plan around my mother," she said, "you should understand why she left." Silence. Charles reportedly gestured for her to sit. She refused. Because what came next wasn't a plea. It was a reckoning. Zara's voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It cut. She spent her entire life being loyal to this family, she began. More than any of you. She never asked for attention. Never chased cameras. Never cashed in. She worked while the rest of you fought for press headlines. No one interrupted. Not even Camilla. Not even William, who usually would have tried to moderate the temperature. Zara continued. She begged you to draw the line with Andrew. You didn't. She told you the public would notice. That they'd stop trusting us. You dismissed her. Then came the bombshell. She's not just tired. She's not just angry. She's sick. The room reportedly went dead quiet. Zara didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The implications hung in the air like fog over the Norfolk marshes. Her mother, the one royal who never showed weakness, was ill, and she'd chosen to keep it from the public. To step back quietly, without pity, without spectacle. And the family? They'd turned her resignation into a political puzzle. An inconvenience to be managed. A PR crisis to spin. Zara's next words? Chilling. You're talking about filling in her schedule like she's been replaced. She hasn't. She stepped away because she couldn't stand to watch this anymore. William, according to one insider, tried to steer the conversation. We understand how much she's given. No one's denying that. But Zara wasn't finished. No, you don't. Because if you did, she'd be here. And she's not. Because she doesn't trust this room anymore. At that point, Queen Camilla reportedly attempted to pivot, to restore calm, to frame the conversation in terms of public service continuity. But then Zara delivered her final blow. You're about to lose the only royal people still believe in. And the worst part is, you deserve it. Then she turned and walked out. No hugs. No curtsy. No polite royal exit. Just the sound of boots on hardwood and a door clicking shut. What followed was chaos. Not screaming. Not drama. But stunned silence. Because the unspoken truth had finally been said aloud. The monarchy wasn't collapsing from scandal, or paparazzi, or politics. It was crumbling from within. From arrogance. From betrayal. From rot. And with and gone, the rot was suddenly visible. In the hours that followed, the meeting dissolved. William was seen pacing alone in the gardens. Camilla reportedly retired early to her room, visibly shaken. Charles. He did what he always does when overwhelmed. He went into the library and stayed there until long after midnight. What was discussed behind closed doors after that? We can only speculate. But one thing is clear. Zara Tindall didn't just defend her mother. She torched the illusion of unity. She forced the family to see what and had tried so hard to avoid. That duty alone is no longer enough to hold the crown together. The people expect honesty, integrity, transparency, and in Anne's absence, none of those things felt certain anymore. But here's the twist. Just as Zara was leaving Sandringham, she received a message, a tip-off, from someone inside the palace. A warning that someone close to Prince Andrew had begun leaking private medical details about her mother. Information and had fought hard to keep silent. Information that, if exposed, would turn her dignified exit into another royal circus. And Zara? She's not about to let that happen. Because the next chapter isn't about history. It's about revenge. And what she does next will shake the palace in ways it never could. What kind of woman works harder than everyone else, and then vanishes without a word? That's the question gripping royal watchers around the world. Because while the palace reels from the sudden announcement of Princess Anne's total withdrawal from royal duties, the rest of us are left stunned, trying to piece together the story of a woman who never asked to be a headline, and yet just made the most consequential royal move since the abdication crisis of 1936. But to truly understand the weight of what just happened, we have to go back. Not just weeks or months, but decades. Because this isn't just about a resignation. It's about a legacy. A quiet revolution that's been unfolding right under our noses for half a century. Let's talk about Princess Anne, the soldier no one saw coming. From the moment she was born in 1950, and Elizabeth Alice Louise wasn't meant to matter. Not in terms of succession. Not in terms of headlines. She was the spare to the spare. The second child of Queen Elizabeth II, sandwiched between the future King Charles and the Queen's later sons, Andrew and Edward. In royal terms, she was a footnote. And yet, somehow, Anne refused to stay in the margins. What drove her? Was it rebellion? Obligation? Or something deeper, something darker? A hunger to prove that worth wasn't something handed to you with a title, but something you earned, bloodied and breathless, over decades of grit? Because that's exactly what she did. While others partied and worked, while others courted the media and disappeared into the fields, the factories, the refugee camps, the military bases, she traveled to disaster zones, sat with injured veterans, wrote her own speeches, took notes. No flash, no scandal, just relentless, punishing discipline. Did you know that Anne once undertook 547 official royal engagements in a single year? That's more than Prince William, Harry, Kate, and Meghan combined in some years. No entourage, no styling team, no press strategist, just a battered handbag, a practical coat, and a schedule that would make a political campaign manager cry. She didn't want the spotlight. She wanted results. Ask anyone who's ever worked with her. And doesn't suffer fools. She's known to be blunt, sometimes abrasive, but always razor-sharp. At diplomatic functions, she's been seen correcting ministers on their statistics. At charity events, she quizzes directors on budget lines. And heaven help the aide who shows up unprepared, because, and we'll call it out, she didn't inherit that iron will from her father, Prince Philip. She matched it. Some say she even surpassed it. But where Philip was brash and often controversial, and was surgical, calculated, unapologetically competent. And therein lies the irony. The most competent royal of her generation was never supposed to lead. Because of her gender, and was pushed down the line of succession by her younger brothers. If she'd been born later, under modern rules, she would have outranked them. But she didn't complain. She didn't protest. She just kept working. Let that sink in. This is a woman who endured royal sexism, survived a violent attempted kidnapping at gunpoint, lived through decades of tabloid cruelty, and still clocked in for duty every single morning. Rain or shine, sickness or health, family drama or public scandal, and showed up every time. She's been called the crown's hardest worker. But maybe that title undersells her. Maybe she's actually the glue, the person who kept the entire royal machine humming while flashier royals stole the headlines. Remember 2021? Prince Philip had just died. The Queen was grieving. Harry and Meghan were dropping bombshell interviews. Prince Andrew was sinking deeper into disgrace. The royal image was teetering on the edge of a cliff. And who stepped up? Anne.